In 1907, a work crew in Arizona was digging a routine trench. Nothing special, nothing dangerous, just another job under the desert sun. Then their shovels hit something that wasn't supposed to be there. Not rock, not water pipe, something carved, something built by human hands, buried far below ground in a place where no one had ever built anything before. The foreman stopped the work immediately, and what happened next was never fully explained, not then and not now, more than a century later. This is the story of what those workers found beneath Arizona in 1907, and even today, historians, engineers, and archaeologists still can't agree on what it actually was. Let's set the scene first, because it matters. 9/7. Arizona wasn't even a state yet. It was still a territory, 5 years away from officially joining the Union. The area where this happened sat on the edge of a growing settlement. Workers were laying groundwork for new infrastructure. Simple digging, the kind of job that usually produces nothing more exciting than dirt and rock. According to a short article published in a regional newspaper that year, the crew was several feet down when their tools struck something solid, not stone, something with edges too straight to be natural. Picture it with me. Dust hanging in the afternoon heat, men leaning on shovels, wiping sweat from their faces, and below them, half exposed in the trench, a surface that looked like it had been shaped on purpose. The foreman knelt down and brushed away the loose dirt with his hands, and that's when he realized this wasn't a rock formation at all. It was some kind of structure. Word spread fast through the small crew. Within an hour, more men had gathered around the trench, staring down at something none of them could explain. Now, here's where the story gets complicated, and I want to be upfront with you about that. The original newspaper account from 1907 is short, frustratingly short. It describes the discovery in only a few sentences, mentions that local officials were notified, and then the trail goes cold. No follow-up article, no official survey report that has survived to today. Just one newspaper clipping, hinting at something extraordinary, and then almost nothing after that. So what did they actually find? Based on that original account, along with some later research into the area's history, most descriptions point to some kind of underground chamber or passage, walls that seemed deliberately shaped, a structure that didn't match anything the workers had encountered before while digging in that region. That alone raises a huge question. Who built it? And more importantly, when? This is where responsible historians have to slow down and be careful, because the temptation with a story like this is to jump straight to something dramatic, an ancient lost civilization, a secret buried city, and there simply isn't solid evidence for that. What there is a real historical mystery sitting quietly in the gap between what was reported and what was ever properly investigated. One possible explanation involves the region's much older human history. Indigenous peoples had lived across Arizona for thousands of years before European settlers arrived, including cultures that built complex irrigation systems, dwellings, and underground storage structures. According to researchers who study the broader region, some ancient communities did construct underground or partially underground spaces for storing food, regulating temperature, or in some cases, ceremonial purposes. If the 1907 crew had accidentally uncovered something like this, it wouldn't be supernatural at all. It would be an incredible archaeological find, connecting directly to the deep, rich history of the people who lived in that land long before it became a U.S. territory. That's a respectful, grounded explanation, and it might be the true one. Here's the problem. If that's what happened, why wasn't it properly documented? Discoveries like that, genuine indigenous structures, were sometimes studied by archaeologists even in the early 1900s. So why does this discovery seem to just disappear? The historical record? That's the first real crack in the story, and it's about to get stranger. Because a second, much smaller reference to this same discovery appears in a private letter, later donated to a regional historical society decades after 1907. The letter was written by someone connected to local government at the time. In it, the writer briefly mentions the matter of the excavation being handled quietly to avoid, in their words, unnecessary alarm among residents. Now, that phrase alone opens up a completely new direction. Unnecessary alarm. What could a buried structure possibly do to alarm an entire community enough that officials wanted it handled quietly? We don't know. The letter doesn't explain further. It simply confirms that something was found, and that the people in charge deliberately chose not to make a big public deal out of it. That's not proof of a cover-up in the dramatic sense you might be imagining. Early 1900s territorial governments often preferred to avoid public excitement or unexplained discoveries, partly to prevent treasure hunters from swarming the site, and partly because verifying and studying something properly, time nobody was in a hurry to spend. Still, it's hard not to wonder, if this was simply an old, explainable structure, why did anyone need to avoid alarming the public in the first place? If you're starting to feel the pull of this mystery the way I did while researching it, this is exactly the kind of forgotten historical puzzle this channel exists to dig into. Subscribe now, because the deeper we go into this one, the stranger the trail gets. Let's keep going, because the story doesn't stop with a quiet letter and a short newspaper clipping. In the 1950s, nearly 50 years after the original discovery, a local historian working on a broader project about the area's early development came across both the newspaper clipping and the private letter. Intrigued, they tried to locate the original site. They couldn't. By then, decades of new construction had completely transformed that part of town. Roads been paved. Buildings had gone up. Whatever trench those workers dug in 1907 was long gone, buried under modern infrastructure with no clear marker of where it had ever been. So even if someone wanted to go back and properly investigate today, there's a very real chance the original site simply cannot be found. That's an incredibly frustrating dead end, but it's also exactly the kind of detail that makes a mystery like this linger for over a century, not because it's supernatural, but because the physical evidence itself vanished before anyone thought to fully study it. Let's pause and take stock of what we actually know for certain. A work crew in 1907 uncovered some kind of man-made structure underground. Local officials were notified. A private letter suggests the discovery was deliberately kept quiet, and the exact location has since been lost beneath modern development. Every other detail beyond that, what the structure actually was, who built it, why officials wanted to avoid public alarm, remains genuinely unknown. Some regional historians lean toward the archaeological explanation, an accidental discovery of an older indigenous structure that was handled without proper study and quietly left buried once the trench work was completed. That theory fits the historical pattern of the era reasonably well. Early territorial governments weren't always equipped or willing to pause active construction projects for lengthy archaeological digs. But there's another detail that complicates even this reasonable explanation. The 1907 newspaper clipping includes one specific line that doesn't quite fit. It describes the structure as extending well beyond where digging could safely continue, suggesting the passage or chamber continued further than the crew was able or willing to explore. If it was simply a storage chamber or a small dwelling space, you wouldn't expect the description to suggest something extending onward into darkness. That phrasing implies scale, possibly a passage that kept going further than anyone in 1907 was prepared to follow. So now we're left with an entirely new question layered on top of the old ones. Not just what was found, but how far did it actually go? We know nobody has ever been able to answer that because nobody ever finished exploring it, and the site itself is gone. It's worth saying clearly here that there is no confirmed connection between this discovery and any of the popular legends about hidden tunnels or lost underground cities, sometimes associated with the American Southwest. Those stories exist in local folklore, but they aren't supported by verified evidence, and this particular 1907 shouldn't be lumped in with them without real proof connecting the two. What we have is much more modest, and honestly, more haunting because of that. A real newspaper clipping, a real private letter, a real crew of ordinary workers who found something they didn't expect on an ordinary day, doing ordinary work. And then silence. The kind of silence that isn't dramatic or cinematic, just quiet, bureaucratic silence. The kind where a discovery gets mentioned once, handled quietly, and slowly fades out of memory as the decades pass. That's often how real historical mysteries actually work, not with a dramatic cover-up, but with simple neglect. Nobody deciding to hide the truth forever, just nobody making the discovery a priority until it was too late to ever properly examine it. So what's the most likely explanation, based on everything we've covered? The strongest, most evidence-based theory is that the 1907 crew stumbled onto some kind of older structure, very possibly connected to the region's long indigenous history, that was never properly studied due to the priorities and limitations of the time. That explanation fits the newspaper account. It fits the private letter's mention of avoiding public alarm, since unexplained discoveries could easily disrupt ongoing construction and attract unwanted attention. And it fits the broader historical pattern of underdocumented discoveries throughout that era. But it still leaves that one unsettling detail hanging in the air. The suggestion that whatever they found extended further than anyone was willing to follow. Was that just a nervous exaggeration from a worker eager to end a strange, unsettling day? Very possibly. People describing something unfamiliar and half-lit underground can easily overstate what they saw. Or did those workers genuinely stop right at the edge of something far larger than a simple storage chamber? Something that was then buried, forgotten, and eventually paved over completely? We'll likely never know for certain. Without the original site, and without any surviving official survey, this mystery may remain permanently incomplete. And maybe that's exactly why it stayed alive in local historical circles for over 100 years. Not because it promises some wild, sensational answer, but because it represents something we rarely get to sit with in history. A real discovery, briefly glimpsed, then lost before anyone could fully understand it. Somewhere beneath the streets of that Arizona town today, there may still be something down there. Or there may be nothing left at all, long since destroyed by decades of construction. Nobody currently knows which is true. So I'll leave you with this. If those workers in 1907 really did find something extending beyond where they dared to dig, what do you think was waiting further down that passage, and why do you think it was left unexplored? What's your theory on what those workers really found beneath Arizona back in 1907? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. If this mystery kept you hooked the way it kept me hooked while digging through the research, give this video a like and subscribe for more real, forgotten historical mysteries just like this. I'll see you in the next investigation.